Estate planning is not what it used to be. In the olden days, you would go see a lawyer. It took a long time. It was super duper expensive. Now you can do wills cheaply online and super, super fast. So that's hooray. The challenge, though, is there's a lot more things for us to be thinking about, including assets that are not financial, they're not furniture, they're digital. Like, who gets my iPhoto library? How is that taken care of in the will and thought through long before I meet my demise? We're going to talk with Tim Hewson. He is CEO and co-founder of LegalWills, and he joins us now to talk about estate planning. Hello there, Tim.
Hi, Bruce. Thank you so much for having me on.
We spoke in 2017, which is
We
about a
did.
thousand years ago. You were the first, you were the original doing all that. Did you even have like the CDs that I could buy in Canadian Tire? Was that you? That was somebody else.
No, we were the first to kind of do it online, which
Online,
was,
like on the internet.
yeah, which was an interesting challenge back then. You're asking people to potentially put in sensitive information online. Yeah.
Right.
So
And
we were,
today we don't even think about it. We do it all the time.
that's right. Yeah.
So I
So
do want to begin with this digital angle because I think it's so relevant. We have photos, we have passwords, we have all sorts of things that are ephemeral. And as you say, there's a real concern that that could fall into a digital black hole. As it relates to our estate plan, how do we need to think about that? What do we need to do in advance?
there are a number of different issues here. So one of them is just allowing your executor to access what they need to access. And that executor could be your spouse. And
Yeah.
can your spouse access your email or access your phone? Now, particularly with two-factor authentication, it's just not just a matter of, oh, log in, I can see their financial assets. As an executor, they have responsibility to gather those assets up, value them, report back to CRA, say what the assets are. So you have to firstly make sure that you have a good documentation of what those assets are and make sure that your executor can get access to them when they need them. So that's like just looking at the user IDs and passwords angle.
Mm.
But then there's also digital assets. What do you do with your Bitcoin? Can you pass that on to somebody? And also now we're seeing, I think particularly with young people, with gig economy, vibe coding, they're getting income coming from a YouTube channel, income coming from, different ventures that they might have going on. So how are your assets all documented? How much is your domain name worth or your Twitter handle or things like that? So
Yeah.
there's all of these things that need to be considered and potentially passed on to your beneficiaries.
My mom died a year ago, and I have her slides, and they're in the garage. And I got to figure out what am I going to do with all these slides. Some are family photos, and some she was an extraordinary photographer of flowers. So I have to think about what I'm going to do with that. But in my life, I will have amassed thousands, probably tens of thousands of photos on my phone in my, virtual account. What's your guidance on how people should? None of that has any value monetarily, but what are people going to do with that? What should I think about how people will manage those assets?
So it's a good distinction to make as to whether they have financial value, sentimental value, or no value at all. You say you have thousands. My teenage daughter takes 1,000 photos a week.
Right.
So she's going to
And
leave
she's
quite the
in half of
footprint.
them.
Yes. So yeah, some of them may need to be, and you have to make sure that there's not discord between family members as to what that value is and who's going to receive them. So they may be digital assets in the cloud. They could be photos. But you can't have one of the adult children saying, yeah, I'm just going to ditch it all. Who has responsibility? Who's going to take the responsibility to decide whether that has
Oh,
financial value, emotional value, or no value at all? And making sure that that person has access to them. And technically, it's not as simple as just giving them a user ID and password because that violates the terms of use agreement of using that service, that online service that you're using. So some services allow you to name beneficial or digital executors to them, but you have to make sure that people have access.
Yeah, yeah. I think I have one account where I have like a UPC code and I printed or like a QR code and I printed it off and put it with my will. So that's one of these things. But how different are the various tech companies in terms of how they're treated? Like, is Instagram similar to Twitter in terms of those accounts and what happens in the event of death?
Yeah, so they've come on board, and that's one of the nice things about our 20-year journey or 26-year journey now of providing this service. We have seen an evolution. And in Facebook, you can have a legacy account holder. So somebody who can decide what's going to happen to your Facebook profile. And different service providers, that's under the Meta umbrella. So Instagram have that same thing. So definitely the major companies have thought this through, and you can set up a legacy account holder. But some of those less valuable ones, there's nothing worse than getting a LinkedIn notification to say, congratulate this person on their 5th-year anniversary. And you think, that person died 3 years ago. Can somebody shut that account down? It's just distasteful. So having somebody doing that cleaning as well of your digital footprint is important.
When the world was exclusively physical, it was very easy to look at the boxes and think about how you're going to distribute whatever is in those boxes. In a virtual world, you mentioned Bitcoin. Family members might not even know you have that account. So it is critical that that be codified in a document somewhere. How do you make sure that you like do the checklist and say, do I have Bitcoin? No, I don't have Bitcoin. Do I have, a credit in my Air Canada? Well, let's talk about miles, frequent flyer miles. How do those get accounted for in a will?
Air miles cannot be passed down to another account holder. You can't have a beneficiary of your air miles. They're done when you die.
So if
Yeah.
you know that your last day on Earth, you better get those bucket list trips going because that asset's going to nobody.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it was the same as your iTunes collection that you've paid for. You're technically just renting those assets within iTunes. You don't own any of
I
them,
don't
so
think I knew
you
that. I
can't
did not
pass
know
those
that.
down either. Yeah.
Wow. We
So,
know.
so to your point, we actually provide a service. We call it LifeLocker, where we take you through those steps of documenting all of your assets to make sure things aren't forgotten. Because another thing that people sometimes a misconception is, I just give people access to my email. It'll all be in there. Yeah, along with a bunch of other stuff that you don't want people to necessarily see as well. So it's good for you to curate exactly what you're passing on to your executor, not just give them a free fall of your whole digital history.
What is your recommendation on how a human should communicate their wishes outside of the piece of paper? So it's great. You do a legal wills thing, it's online, you print it out, everybody knows about it. Should people be walking their beneficiaries through those specifics to mitigate surprise or clarify questions, or is that, part of a grand reveal?
I wouldn't say the beneficiaries, but your executor, certainly. Your
Okay.
executor needs to know they have been appointed, and here is the binder, what happens, here is the binder of everything, and it includes a list of all of the assets, all the people to contact, my important documents, a will and a power of attorney. If you're not dying, but you're incapacitated, all of those documents are together. And the beauty is actually, touch on this, that some provinces allow all of those documents to be online now. In BC, you can electronically sign and electronically store your will. That's a legal pathway now in BC. The other provinces are kind of coming on board with it. It makes so much more sense because then you can give your executor a passcode to go in and access the whole thing. So it's not all lost in the house fire or the flood and the natural disaster.
You've had some surprises, things I hadn't thought of so far. Let's extend that list. I know that in my will, you need banking information, investment information, physical assets like real estate or whatever. What are other things that people might not consider and might not think about that your platform would prompt? Questions that would ask for them to include things that they might not otherwise include?
Um, Well, and it's interesting because it's different for a power of attorney or a living will. There's a medical directive as well, kind of treatments you would want to receive if you were ever in a irreversible terminal condition, those kind of things should be all part of that package as well. But within the will, it's certainly your financial assets, your online accounts. Like, it's so funny because when people start to put together a list of their online accounts, they say, man, this is quite the task. And you say, yeah, imagine doing this for your brother-in-law if you're their executor of their will and you have you don't even know where to start. We know, for example, that our parents used to have maybe 2 bank accounts. They get a monthly statement in the mail. Yeah. We have accounts all over the place, and they may be PayPal or Stripe or just smaller splintered accounts and fractured all over the place. So just getting a sense of all of those things, not just financial assets, but also those emotional and sentimental things as well.
It is completely unacceptable to me that the Canadian adults, many of them do not have wills. So we'll just say that first and foremost, everybody should have a will if they're a grown-up because it's going to make life simpler. But on what frequency should they be updating their will?
It should be looked at periodically, but certainly when there's a change in your financial situation and your family situation. So obviously marital status, children, grandchildren, things like that. The one that's often overlooked, though, is if there's a change in circumstance to anybody who's named in the will. So you've named an executor and suddenly they're hospitalized. Well, that's pretty important. Or they've moved to Australia, right? So making sure that everybody who's named in the will, and you should have a good sense of who's named in your will, and you know if something happens to them, it's time to update your will. But it can also be a change of heart, like a charity suddenly comes into your life and you feel that you value their movement and you want to acknowledge that in your will, update your will. It shouldn't be a $2,000 process to update your will. Certainly if you use an online service, it's convenient to do that. But even if nothing has changed, take a look at it every couple of years.
Really interesting stuff. Tim, thank you for joining us today.
You're very welcome.
Tim Hewson, CEO and co-founder at LegalWills. And we were talking about, yes, that my big commercial the drum I will continue to beat, which is everybody should just get a will. But in particular, the focus of our conversation was, how do you think about estate planning in the digital age that we find ourselves in?